president is at the G8 summit in Northern Ireland today, where no doubt one dominating topic will be the U.S.'s increased military aid to the rebels in Syria. And for more on that situation, we turn to Emanuele Ottolenghi. He is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Thank you for coming in.
Pleasure.
Obviously, there's going to be a lot of topics going on at the G8, but we are very focused on wondering, specifically, what do you think is going to come out on the topic of Syria at the G8 summit? What do you think we're going to hear on this?
One of the dominating features of this two-year-long conflict is some of the dynamics look like the Cold War, maybe in a slightly reduced fashion, because the Syrian regime is being supported by the Russian regime and by the Iranian regime. And the West has been pondering, while people get killed, whether we should ourselves step in and support the other side. Mm-hmm. It seems that with the position taken by the U.S. administration last week, this is going to be the dynamics in the next few weeks. Of course, you will find strong diverging positions between Russia and the United States and its allies at the G8 as a result. So we will see how this pans out.
Right. As you mentioned, there's, some people have kind of, well, for instance, Senator John McCain came out and said on Friday that he thought it was disgraceful that the U.S. had not jumped in, that it had taken this long. Do you think he has a point there, or do you think it was the right move for the U.S., for the president to kind of decide, let's wait and see how this plays out?
I think we shouldn't make the perfect the enemy of the good. The human toll is horrific. 93,000 confirmed deaths, over 1 million people who are now refugees outside of the country, up to 4.5 million people displaced inside the country, ethnic cleansing on a vast scale. You have the trademarks of a disastrous human situation, and it's terrible that the West, that is supposed to stand for human rights, is basically standing on the sidelines. At the same time, this is a huge dilemma, and the kind of aid we're talking about is not going to really change the balance. But one thing it will change is that it will prevent the Syrian regime, who has been responsible for this horrific human toll, from overrunning the country and slaughtering the civilian population at the rate it has done so far. So I think there is some good in this intervention, even if the policy questions are still very difficult.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to the people who criticize out there that, specifically maybe here in America, they've seen the conflicts that we have gotten involved in, fresh off, with Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and they say, oh my gosh, we don't need to get in the middle of another war. Do we really have a dog in this fight, so to speak? What do you say to that?
Well, I say two things. We have seen the use of chemical weapons in Syria, and so even though we may not have a dog in this fight, we don't want any of the dogs in the fight to use these kind of weapons. So our intervention might actually prevent the further use of chemical weapons. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we're not talking about the same kind of intervention we saw in Iraq or even in Afghanistan. We're going to see Western, U.S.-led supplies of weapons and perhaps training to the rebels outside of the theater of conflict. There are not going to be U.S. soldiers or Western soldiers directly involved in the conflict. So we're talking about a completely different scale of involvement, but one that will enable the West to influence the course of events to our advantage.
Any thoughts on the U.S. now getting involved, if this is going to kind of hasten the toppling of the Assad regime? Is this going to move things faster? What do you think the progression will be from here on out?
Well, President Obama said in August 2011 that, quote-unquote, President Assad must go. So for two years, more or less, the position has been that this regime is undesirable because of how it's behaved, but that the rebels were able to somehow deliver that proposition. This hasn't happened. We have seen actually a turn of the tide. The regime is now on the offensive. It has taken a strategic town recently. It is moving ahead, and therefore we are at a situation, a critical point in the conflict, where it may be that the regime could win. And that's, I think, the reason why the U.S. administration has decided to step in. not so much to get drawn into a conflict, but to ensure that this regime does not win, that the rebels have a chance.
Right, the timing may be appropriate for it right now. Emanuele Ottolenghi, thank you so much for coming in and discussing this. We'll see what comes out of the G8 on this topic as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.